right, guys, this is lesson 31 for April 14th. We have just finished Fire and Ice. Things are going the way that I planned them weeks before you see this video. And we are finishing up with the poetry terms to know. So you will need to have access to the notes, either from the paper packet in lesson 30 or in the digital notebook. So you're going to want to have this sheet. We started taking notes in the video on during lesson 30, and now we're finishing up here in lesson 31. So actually, to go back, in lesson 30, when we started taking notes, we took notes primarily on mechanics, looking at how a poem is put together and what the language is for discussing the form of poetry. Now we're going to give you a term about sound devices. So term number 8 is assonance. Assonance is a form of repetition. And so you're familiar with alliteration. You're getting familiar with anaphora. So alliteration, she sells seashells by the seashore. Okay, the repetition of the same sound at the beginning of a word. And then anaphora would be, I have a dream today, I have a dream that one day, the repetition of several words at the beginning of a sentence. So assonance is another form of repetition, and that's the repetition of vowel sounds inside of words. So if you look at what's on the screen here, you see the rain in Spain falls mainly on or in the plains. So you've got that long A sound, that AI construction. So it's inside of the word, not on the beginning of the word. So assonance is a vowel sound on the inside of a word, within a word. So if you look at some of the examples on the slides here, you can see that long A sound being repeated here on the slide with the cat. Okay, the cat ran after the alligator passed. Okay, so you've got that sound that's being repeated. Right? And then you can see it here, down here with the O sound within the words. Poetry is old, ancient, goes back far. It is amongst the oldest of living things. So old it is that no man knows how and why the first poems came. So you're looking for a vowel sound inside of a word, and that creates assonance. Assonance. Now we're looking at types of poems, and unfortunately we're not going to cover as many types of poems as we would ordinarily in a regular year, but we're doing our best here, so we're going to start with spoken word. Spoken word is poetry that's written to be performed aloud in front of an audience. Most often, spoken word poetry tells a story. So in that sense, it's like a performance of a narrative. So a little example that's kind of cute is Phil Kaye, and he's one of my favorite spoken word poets. He works with a woman named Sarah Kaye, who's amazing. So this is his example of a spoken word poem called Before the Internet. And you can listen to it and see how it is a story, but the intention is for it to be heard, not read.
It is summertime in the 90s, before the internet, and I'm sitting on the couch with Ben, my best friend, who has a bowl cut like I do, and I ask Ben what he wants to do, and Ben says what he always says. Oh no, dude, what do you want to do? And I don't know either, because it's already 2 months in the summertime, and we have done everything we think we can do. Played basketball so many times, Ben knows I will never go late. Stayed up until midnight to watch the R-rated VHS tapes my mother owns. Pulled each other around in a wagon, and toilet papered every house on the street except for our own. And so we turn on the television, and Indiana Jones is playing. And afterwards we go outside because there is no internet. And we stare at the big tree on our street, the tree that is bigger than Ben's entire house, the tree that we have never been able to climb because we are little kids. But now we are little kids that just watched Indiana Jones. And so we find some old bungee cords, and the hooks find themselves in our belt loops, and the other side's tied around the branches, and now we are almost to the top of the big tree. And anytime I am tired, I sit back, and I swing, and I quietly think to myself, maybe I am Indiana Jones. And Ben quietly thinks to himself, maybe This is a bad idea. And my belt loops quietly think to themselves, you fundamentally must understand my ability. But we are all thinking quietly. And so for a few seconds, it is silent. And at 9 years old, I transform into things I've never been before. An astronaut floating in space, a hummingbird buzzing in place, a beam of August light floating through the leaves. And then I hear a crack, which is not Indiana Jones, but my belt loops snapping apart, shrieking relief, and I fall all the way down the tree onto my back. And Ben rushes down and says, "Are you okay?" And I say, "I think so." And Ben starts to laugh. And I start to laugh, and I'm bleeding from my elbow, but it's just a scrape. And that means that I am human and alive. And we sit under the big tree and giggle until my mother comes to find us.
So spoken word is a favorite of mine. So hopefully we'll get to see some more of that and kind of play around with how fun that can be. So we've got spoken word. Come on. Then our next type of poetry that we'll look at is blank verse. And this is poetry written without rhythm, but not, or written with rhythm, but not rhyme. Okay, with rhythm, but not rhyme. So if you look at the end rhyme at the end of each of these lines, you see hill, line, again, go. Okay, there's not a lot of rhyme there, but there is rhythm. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill. And on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go. So you can hear that kind of rhythmy beat kind of happening that's sort of regular as you read it, but there's no real rhyme. So blank verse has rhythm, but not rhyme. Another example of blank verse would be Shakespeare. So Shakespeare is famous for iambic pentameter, which is a very regular rhyme scheme. He doesn't have a lot of rhyme. So when you listen to this excerpt from Shakespeare, you can hear the beat, da 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 da, but there's not a lot of rhyme. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing in them, to die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. You get that dun 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 dun. Okay, so blank verse, rhythm, no rhyme. Then we get to free verse. Free verse has even fewer rules than blank verse. Blank verse actually can have a lot of rules if it has a very strict rhythm, but free verse is very open. It's simple poetry without rhythm or rhyme, often written to sound like a conversation. So you can see this simple example here inside of the orange box. I was not happy with the rain until my eye caught 5 wet leaves. A mysterious autumn watercolor gift here on this broken road. So it's just kind of like thinking aloud a little bit sometimes. The intention is more to form an image than it is to create rhythm or rhyme. It's more meant to be a visual picture. So that's free verse. And then there's a couple more examples of free verse that you're welcome to take a look at. And then the last one is narrative poetry. So narrative poetry is a poem written as a story. So this is the written version of spoken word. Spoken word is narrative poetry meant to be performed and heard. A narrative poem is written down and intended to be read by another person. Okay, so narrative poetry and spoken word are very similar in terms of the content, but they're very different in terms of the presentation of the product. And that is it. We got all our terms there, kiddos. You are done. Okay. I think I gave directions in class for how to turn in the notes so that you get credit for being responsible and taking care of that. So follow those directions, and I will see you next time.